everyone, my name is Helen. Welcome to the Shrimpy McGee channel. Today I'm going to be talking about resumes. I hope this really helps you guys. Maybe you want to grab a piece of paper and a pen or make some notes in your phone, or maybe even just consider subscribing to this channel. That way when you're thinking about this later on, it won't be hard to go back and find it, because I'm going to give you some really good tips. I've edited about 10 resumes in about the last 10 days, and every single one of them had at least one, if not half, of the sort of things I'm going to talk about, like mistakes on those different resumes. So without any further ado, let's get right into my tips about making a better resume, one that's more modern or one that's appropriate for you, because that's something I'm seeing a lot too, resumes that are just not appropriate for the person who's making the different resume. So you'll understand what that means a bit more, but let's get into tip number one, which is just the file name itself. There's actually, you can write a file name with spaces in between it. So for instance, it would be like Shrimpy space McGee .doc or .pdf. I would strongly suggest you don't do this. I would suggest that you use your name. So let's say Shrimpy _ McGee _ resume is the way I would write it, .pdf or .docx or whatever it is, the file that you're working with, but it's probably going to be a Word file or a PDF depending on where you're applying. So use those underscores or use a hyphen, and there's like different reasons for this, but if you leave a space, what it does often on the other end is it will replace it with these weird sort of percentage looking signs. And so just from keeping files looking nice and neat and really legible, use those hyphens or underscores. Do not use spaces, and sometimes I used to just jam them all together like Shrimpy McGee .pdf, and that doesn't look great either. People think that might look a little cleaner or easier to read. It really isn't. Just use the underscore or use a hyphen. I got this piece of information actually from Stanford University. This is where I saw how to name these file names and what the best format is. So definitely take advantage of that if you're not doing so already. Most of the resumes I've seen did not format it this way. They mostly had spaces, so something to be aware of. Objective. I keep seeing an objective section in different resumes. We don't know her. What we want is a summary. And the reason we want a summary is because, people know your objective is to get a job at their corporation, obviously, but a summary is a bit more specific, and it's going to talk about you, what you're good at, what your experience is. It doesn't have to be too long, but it should be full of good keywords that sort of match the job that you're looking for. The case when an objective would be fine is if you're like fresh out of university and you haven't had a job before, then I would say go ahead, you can do something more like an objective. But generally for those of us who've been in the workforce for a little while, a summary is the way to go. And we're not going to be talking too much about how to actually write these. If you think that that would be helpful, definitely give me a like or drop me a comment and let me know if you want to know a bit more about the actual process of what you should write. I'll talk about that briefly later on, but I'm just going to stick to these sort of quick functional tips that I think will really improve your resume in a short amount of time. So that's definitely one of them. Skills. And I've made this mistake before too. I've sent in resumes without actually listing my different skills, and in that case the recruiter actually called me back and she said, can you actually just fix up your resume and make sure that you include your skills, like have a section with your skills. And so what do we mean by skills? We're talking about any sort of software you know how to use, apps, maybe just your interpersonal skills. That can mean different things for different places. Definitely have a look at the job description you're applying for and try and match up the skills that they're asking for with the skills that you have. The other reason for this is there's something called an ATS, which is an applicant tracking system that will scan your resume and it's looking for those skills. So if you say skills and you list out what they are, it helps that automated system yank your resume so that it will give it to the recruiter. Because let's face it, lots of places get like thousands of resumes. You want yours to stand out and be able to sort of pass the bot test, right? Because that's how most resumes, they are scanned by artificial intelligence right now. So make sure that yours gets seen by having the appropriate skills on there. Another thing that I kept seeing in the resumes that I've been looking at is some people are using 2 pages. Some people are using a 1-page resume. In my head, I had thought for the longest time previous to learning a lot more about resume writing that you should only ever have a one-page resume. And that is incorrect. A 1-page resume is completely appropriate if you've had up to about 10 years of experience. Definitely if you're fresh out of college or university, you can definitely have 1 page. Not only is that good, I'd say that's preferable, but if you're sort of a senior executive, you're not going to be able to fit everything into 1 page, and that's fine too. Definitely use up those 2 pages. If you're sort of a little over 1 page, I would say just try and trim that up and get it to 1 page. People love a 1-page resume. It's just a quick snapshot of everything that you've accomplished. So if you can get it on 1 page, great, but don't mess with the margins and make them tiny or make the font really tiny or anything like that. If you need 2 pages and you've been working and in the workforce for a long time, go ahead and use those 2 pages. If the general rule of thumb is like 10 to 15 years in the workforce, then you can go ahead and use 2 pages. Another issue that I keep seeing pop up with resumes is just too much, this is gonna sound weird, but too much job experience. Ageism is a real thing, so you, in my experience, should not be listing things that are more than 15 years old. You don't need to sort of itemize that necessarily by date. There is a way to condense this information. You can just say earlier career experience and just have a section that sort of outlines the different job titles. You don't need to have like massive amount of bullet points for all of that, but you can kind of really condense that. You don't need to list absolutely everything going back into like the 80s or early 90s. You know, I'd say go back about 10 years, 10 to 15 years, and anything further back than that, you just want to say, as I said, earlier career experience. Another thing to remember is that when recruiters and hiring managers scan your resume, and I know because I have hired people before, it's really the top third of your resume that you want to concentrate on making look its absolute best. I mean, obviously the whole resume needs to look great, but that is where the eye first goes. So, you know, they're going to want to see your name. Maybe that's where you're going to put your skills and your summary and your job experience, and just get as much as you can up in that top third and make that look really strong. Because that's how the eye scans. It's gonna, like, the eye is just automatically gonna pull to the top third, and some decisions are gonna be made in that short amount of time. They say that hiring managers and recruiters only spend something like 6 seconds looking at your resume, so you need to grab their attention, and that needs to be the strongest part. This is the #1 thing that I keep seeing again and again. All the 10 resumes that I looked at recently had this mistake in them, and that is including your street address. You don't need to include your street address anymore. They're not going to be mailing you a letter, most likely. They're going to be emailing you or giving you a phone call. So make sure that your phone number is in there, your email address is in there, and make sure that that's correct. And then you can definitely put your city and your state or province that you're in. That is relevant because a lot of recruiters are going to be looking for people that live locally. And don't lie about that too. Like, don't make yourself look fancier than you actually are, because if they do find out, some people have a really good memory, and you know, no lies. Never write a lie on your resume, and that includes don't lie about the town that you're from. Just come up straight about that. Definitely. And the other reason not to leave your address on there is not only do they not need it, I wouldn't say it looks unprofessional. It's not that, but it is a bit of a safety concern. I have been a hiring manager before, and listen, people leave resumes on their desk, and anybody can walk by and look and see where you live, and maybe you don't care, but I've had the resumes of, you know, young women who lived on their own, and so their name is on there, their address is out there for literally anybody passing by a desk to look at. You know, some people, if they have shortlisted some candidates, they'll just like maybe pin them up in their cubicle wall, because those are different like interviews they're gonna be doing that week, and so that's even more visible. I always try my best to sort of hide those resumes, but like sometimes they get printed out and distributed to a lot of people, and you just don't know where your address is going. So I would say stay on the safe side. Just don't include it. They don't need it right now. They'll call you, they'll email you. The next thing I want to talk about is, where does your education section go? The basic rule of thumb is if you're just fresh out of college, university, or maybe 1 or 2 years out and into the workforce, you can put that right up top. That's really relevant to you. You can't really hide that you're just fresh out of university, so you can put the education section right under your objective or summary. We talked about that earlier on in the video. If you're out of, you know, university for a good number of years, put that down toward the bottom. Like, we know that you went to university. If that was a while ago, like, just tuck that down to the bottom of your resume. That doesn't need to be up top. Recruiters spend more time looking at your job titles than anything else on your resume. So make sure those look really good, because the eye, recruiters and hiring managers' eyes, they know this because they've done tracking studies. They track in a sort of F or E pattern. So what that means is they're just sort of looking at the bold job titles and some of the bullets below it, and that is where they focus most of their time looking. So make sure your job titles are really strong and your bullet points are strong too, but the job titles, is the most important thing on your resume. Get those looking good. My next tip is don't use any sort of weird looking cute bullet points. Just use actual bullet points. Those little circles, a clear circle or a filled in little circle, you know, aka a bullet point, but don't use like weird arrows or anything like that, as attractive as they may be. The issue with that is that when that applicant tracking system is scanning it, it might not know what those sort of strange or cute or creative little characters are, and it's just going to make a whole bunch of gobbledygook in their system. So you don't want that, right? You know, your resume needs to be pleasing to the human eye, but don't forget, in many cases, it is getting very carefully scanned by an AI system. An ATS is what it's called. System, you know, I would say the one place where you don't have to worry about that quite as much is if you are applying sort of one-on-one to sort of somebody you know, or a really small business for sort of a more creative job. In that case, you know, let's say you're a graphic designer, of course, show off your skills on your resume. So I'd say in that case, maybe it doesn't apply, but for any sort of big corporation or any place where you know lots of people are sending in their resumes, don't use any weird characters or fonts. So this next point is sort of a big one. I'm a writer, and I just want to tell you something. If you think that you're going to write something better and you need to be really creative and unique in how you've described your job and your different bullet points that are going to go underneath, let me tell you something you do not. I'm not saying to plagiarize something, but I'm saying go online and have a look at another good resume that's sort of in the same field, and there are lots of them up there. Just borrow some of that wording. Let's say you wanted to use something like authored and proofread this website and brochure, such and such website and brochure. Let's just say you copied that from someone else. Someone else wrote literally authored and proofread such, well, I mean, it's going to be a little different because you're going to be putting your project in there, not theirs. So obviously you're not exactly going to be plagiarizing, but what I'm saying is just borrow from other people. Listen, you've got to get out of sight of the mentality of thinking that you are still in school. This isn't a creative writing class where you're going to get graded on how different and how creative your sentences are. This is the business world. And so the business world means that you just want to match it up and use a best practice that's already going on, and that sometimes means just looking at someone else's resume and borrowing some of those great descriptions. You're going to be changing it up anyway because you're going to be inserting your own place of work and your own figures and your own information. You don't need to reinvent the wheel, as they say. You don't need to do that. Just go ahead, have a look online and use some of that stuff, especially if you don't consider yourself to be a really strong writer. Like, why are you killing yourself to think of a really strong action verb when someone else has already done that hard work? Just go find, research, and apply it to your resume. So let's finish up with this tip, and that is numbers are really important on your resume. There's just something about, like I said, this is the business world, right? Don't be vague, be specific. So if you're saying managed a team of workers to do such and such, manage the team of how many workers? What was the net effect of that? Do you have percentages that you can show? Anywhere that you can insert numbers is always good. People are looking for numbers. Like I said, most businesses at the end of the day just want to increase their bottom line. That's why they're hiring you. It is business, right? And business means numbers. So go ahead and rethink your resume and think about any kind of place where you can put in amounts of numbers, statistics. The richer that you make that, the better your resume is going to look. Those are all my tips for now. If you guys found this helpful, there's just so many different tangents I can go on about this, and probably I will, so definitely stay tuned for that. Be sure to give me a like, thumbs up, and subscribe. I hope that was helpful. Please do drop me a note in the comments. I would love to hear from you as well.